To the powers that be in the gleaming temple of consumerism they called the shops at Viridia Valley, she was just another piece of urban scenery that didn't quite belong. A brown face in a pristine sea of white privilege, a potential threat to be managed, neutralized. They saw a target, a statistic waiting to happen. They saw an easy mark, a woman of color with an expensive-looking purse who could be shaken down, accused, and discarded without a second thought. Security officers Peterson and Clark, two wannabe tough guys playing cops and robbers with real lives, tightened their invisible net. Their steps were heavy, deliberate, a predator's gait as they prepared to corner their prey. Then came Officer Derek Thorne. He rolled onto the scene with a swagger born of unearned authority and unchecked power, a smug enforcer of fear masquerading as law. But what none of these men saw, what their prejudice blinded them to, was the inferno raging behind Captain Isabella Moreno's calm, dark eyes. They didn't see the 2 decades of service etched into her soul, the captain's shield on her belt earned through blood, sweat, and a resolve forged in the crucible of real-world justice. They thought she was a sheep they could lead to slaughter. They were about to find out she was the goddamn wolf. And in one blinding, catastrophic moment, their petty arrogance was about to collide with a reckoning they couldn't possibly imagine. But before we get into the heart of this insanity, smash that subscribe button and let me know in the comments below where in the world you're watching from. Trust me, tomorrow's story is a powder keg you don't want to miss. The crisp autumn sun of a Saturday afternoon cascaded through the enormous glass atrium of the Viridia Valley Mall, painting shimmering patterns across the immaculate polished marble floors. Captain Isabella "Izzy" Moreno moved with a quiet, determined grace, the rich leather of her new purse a comforting weight against her hip. After a brutal week buried under a mountain of administrative reports and disciplinary hearings, the simple, mundane task of buying a 16th birthday present for her niece, Sophia, felt like surfacing for a deep breath of fresh air. "Something perfect for my girl," she whispered to herself, her eyes scanning the glittering storefronts of the high-end retailers. The mall was alive with the vibrant hum of weekend commerce. Young families navigating strollers through the crowds, clusters of teenagers laughing by the grand central fountain, couples strolling hand in hand. For a fleeting moment, Izzy allowed the tension in her shoulders to release, pushing the endless grind of the precinct from her mind. That precious sense of peace lasted for precisely 12 minutes. She saw them first, not directly, but as distorted reflections in the polished chrome of a store's window display. 2 security guards. Peterson, the taller one, with a cheap buzz cut and a self-important posture, was speaking into his shoulder radio, his eyes locked directly on her. Clark, shorter and visibly younger, kept flicking his gaze from her to his partner, a nervous energy radiating off him. Izzy's jaw hardened into a familiar, rigid line. 20 years on the force had honed her senses to a razor's edge. She could smell surveillance from a mile away. It wasn't the first time she'd been followed in a store. The bitter sting of it was an old, unwelcome companion. But familiarity didn't dilute the poison. "Affirmative," Peterson's voice crackled, just loud enough to carry across the corridor. "Hispanic female, late 40s, black leather bag, gray cashmere sweater, maintaining visual." The words were a physical blow. Izzy's fingers, manicured just that morning, curled into tight, bloodless fists inside her pockets. The primal urge to whirl around, to flash her shield and watch the color drain from their faces, to make them grovel and squirm under the weight of their own bigotry, surged through her like a jolt of electricity. But she suppressed it. No. She was off duty. She was here for Sophia. She would not let these pathetic little men poison this day for her. Taking a slow, calming breath, She turned and stepped into Aura Fine Jewelry. It was the epitome of luxury, a sanctuary of quiet opulence. The air was thick with the scent of expensive vanilla candles, and a soft, classical melody drifted from hidden speakers. Behind a gleaming glass counter stood a woman in her 50s, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, her blazer impeccably tailored. Her name tag read, Brenda. As Izzy entered, Brenda's body stiffened, a subtle but unmistakable shift. Her professionally pleasant smile became a brittle, painted-on mask. "Can I help you?" Brenda's tone was sharp, layered with a suspicion that was as clear as the diamonds glittering under the lights. Her smile never reached her cold, assessing eyes. "Just looking, thank you," Izzy replied, her voice a smooth, steady counterpoint to the frantic hammering of her heart against her ribs. She moved deliberately towards a display case filled with delicate silver charm bracelets, precisely the kind Sophia had been unsubtly hinting at for the past 6 months. Through the reflective glass, Izzy could see Brenda tracking her every move in a large mirror mounted behind the counter. Outside the store's open entrance, Peterson and Clark were making a clumsy show of examining a mall directory, their focus entirely on her. "All of these cases are locked," Brenda announced, her voice unnecessarily loud as she suddenly appeared at Izzy's elbow. "Items can only be removed for viewing by a staff member." "I'm aware of how a jewelry store works," Izzy said, her voice still pleasant, though an icy edge was creeping in. "When I'm ready to see something, I'll be sure to let you know." Brenda didn't retreat. Instead, she hovered closer, her gaze darting from Izzy's face to the designer purse at her side. The bag, a gift to herself after a particularly grueling case, a symbol of her own hard-earned success, suddenly felt like a brand, an indictment. "Actually," Izzy said, straightening to her full 5'8" height, her presence suddenly filling the space between them. "I'd like to see that one, the silver bracelet with the small hummingbird charm." Brenda hesitated for a fraction of a second, then reached for a set of keys clipped to her belt. As she fumbled with the lock on the case, Izzy noticed the slight tremble in her hands. The manager's fear was a palpable thing, a toxic cloud in the air. It was as if she genuinely expected Izzy to snatch the entire velvet-lined tray and make a run for it. The bracelet was exquisite. Delicate, interwoven links of silver caught the light, and the tiny hummingbird charm was studded with microscopic, sparkling sapphires. Izzy smiled, a genuine smile for the first time that day, picturing Sophia's face, the way her eyes would light up. "It's perfect, I'll take it," she began to say. "Excuse me?" Brenda's voice sliced through the moment, sharp and accusatory. "I'm going to need to see the inside of your handbag." The store fell into a sudden, profound silence. The soft, classical music seemed to vanish. Izzy felt the hot, prickling shame of a dozen pairs of eyes turning to stare as other shoppers stopped to watch. "I beg your pardon?" She kept her voice dangerously low, each word a carefully controlled release of pressure. "A piece of jewelry is missing from this very case." Brenda's voice grew louder, gaining a false bravado as Peterson and Clark stepped purposefully into the store, flanking the entrance. "I saw you slip it into your purse when I turned to get my keys." Izzy's hands began to shake, not from fear, but from a white-hot fury that threatened to consume her. "That is a blatant lie. I haven't touched a single thing in this store except for the bracelet you just handed me." "Ma'am, let's not make this difficult," Peterson said, moving forward. His hand rested on his radio, a gesture of practiced intimidation. "Just empty your bag onto the counter and we can all move on with our day." Izzy drew herself up, feeling the familiar weight of her authority settle over her like a well-worn coat. She was no longer a shopper. She was a captain. "I will not. I have stolen nothing. and you possess absolutely no legal right to search my personal property without probable cause." Clark shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his eyes avoiding hers. Brenda's face was now a blotchy red, but she doubled down. "Either you show us what's in the bag, or we'll have to call the police." "This is harassment," Izzy stated, her voice resonating with command. "You have been tailing me since the moment I walked into this mall. You are targeting me because I am a woman of color, and I will not be subjected to this humiliation." Peterson stepped closer, using his size to try and loom over her. It was an amateur move, one she'd seen 1,000 times. "Last chance. Open the bag, or this gets a whole lot more complicated for you." Izzy stood her ground. Her heart was a drum against her ribs, but her voice was as steady as steel. "I am not opening my bag. You have no right, no probable cause, and zero evidence. Back off." "That's it." Peterson grabbed his radio. "Dispatch Code 10 at Aura Fine Jewelry. We have a non-compliant subject, possible theft. Requesting police backup." A small crowd had now gathered at the entrance, a wall of curious faces and raised cell phones. Brenda was wringing her hands, a flicker of doubt finally appearing in her eyes as the situation spiraled beyond her control. Clark looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on Earth. But Izzy didn't budge. She had stared down men with guns, men with knives, men whose souls were rotten with corruption. She would not be broken by 2 mall cops and a prejudiced store manager. Her purse remained firmly at her side, her gaze locked on Peterson's. "You have no idea," she said, her voice a quiet promise of the storm to come. "What a colossal mistake you're making." The air crackled with unspoken threats as they waited. The silence stretched taut, a prelude to the chaos that was about to be unleashed. The tension inside Aura Fine Jewelry was thick enough to choke on, yet Izzy maintained a preternatural calm, a discipline honed by years of de-escalating volatile situations. Her fury was a controlled burn, fueling her resolve. "Before you continue with these slanderous accusations," she said, her voice even and directed at Brenda, "why don't we simply review your security camera footage? It will unequivocally prove that I haven't taken a single thing." Brenda's bravado faltered for a heartbeat. "The cameras?" "They're right there," Izzy said, tilting her head toward the obvious black dome mounted in a ceiling corner. "And there, above the door, and another behind your counter. So let's all watch the video together. It's a simple solution." Peterson, however, wasn't interested in solutions. He was interested in conflict. He lunged forward and grabbed Izzy's right arm, his fingers digging into her bicep with painful force. Clark, looking increasingly miserable, took her left arm, his grip noticeably more hesitant. "You were warned," Peterson growled, his face unpleasantly close. "Now you're interfering with a security operation." Izzy's training screamed at her to react, a simple wrist lock, a shift of weight, and both men would be on the floor. But that would only feed their narrative. Instead, she kept her voice steady and projected it for the benefit of the growing audience and their recording phones. "I am calmly and reasonably requesting to view security footage that would exonerate me. That is not interference. That is a suspect asserting their right to due process." The entrance to the boutique suddenly darkened as a large, uniformed figure shoved his way through the onlookers. Officer Derek Thorne swaggered in, his badge gleaming under the bright lights, his face alight with a predatory eagerness that turned Izzy's stomach. She knew Thorne, not personally, but by his toxic reputation. His file was thick with civilian complaints that regularly crossed her desk, aggressive arrests, excessive force, a clear and disturbing pattern of targeting minority shoppers. He was a lawsuit waiting to happen, yet he'd somehow always managed to slither out of any real consequences, protected by a powerful network within the department and the union. "What's the situation here?" Thorne boomed, his voice artificially loud, performing for the crowd. He surveyed the scene with a proprietary air, his hand resting casually on the butt of his sidearm. A deliberate, calculated act of intimidation. Brenda scurried forward, eager to justify the chaos she'd created. "She stole a bracelet. She won't let us check her bag. She's—" "Another one causing trouble," Thorne cut her off, his hostile gaze zeroing in on Izzy. "Always the same damn story, isn't it?" "Officer," Izzy began, consciously shifting into her professional tone. "This is a simple misunderstanding that could be easily resolved by—" He didn't let her finish. In a shockingly swift movement, Thorne grabbed her by the shoulder and slammed her against the boutique's thick plate glass wall. The impact sent a shockwave through the display cases inside, rattling the jewelry. Shoppers gasped in unison. The cold of the glass was a shock against her cheek, as Thorne used his body weight to pin her. "Don't you dare tell me how to do my job," he snarled, his breath hot and sour in her ear. "Hands behind your back, now." "This is excessive force," Izzy stated loudly, her voice ringing with authority, despite the rage and humiliation burning through her. "I have rights, and you are violating every single one of them." "Rights?" Thorne let out a short, ugly laugh as he wrenched her arms back at a painful angle. "You've got the right to remain silent while I add resisting arrest to the list of charges." The handcuffs clicked shut, the metal biting deep into her wrists, cinched unnecessarily tight. Around them, the crowd had swelled. A forest of smartphones was held aloft, recording every second of the abuse. Whispers of disgust rippled through the onlookers. A few people called out, "Hey, that's not right," but no one dared to intervene. Thorne spun her around and began to march her out into the main mall corridor. Every step was a battle for control for Izzy. She had dedicated her entire career to fighting against precisely this kind of systemic abuse of power. And now, here she was, on the receiving end, the victim in a drama she'd seen play out 100 times before. The mall's central walkway had ground to a halt. Shoppers flattened themselves against storefronts, their phones held high to capture the spectacle. A well-dressed Hispanic woman being paraded out in handcuffs like a common criminal. Izzy held her head high, her posture erect, even as a searing pain shot through her shoulders from the awkward angle of her cuffed arms. "See what happens when you don't cooperate?" Thorne announced loudly, playing to the crowd. "Should have just emptied the damn purse." They reached a side exit where Thorne's patrol car was parked, its lights now flashing, drawing even more attention. The harsh afternoon sun was blinding after the mall's filtered light, and Izzy had to blink away the spots in her vision. "Before this goes any further," she said, her voice clear and cutting, turning to face the sea of onlookers. "I think there's something you should know, Officer Thorne." "Save it for the booking, Sergeant," he snapped, reaching to open the car's rear door. "I am Captain Isabella Moreno, commanding officer of the 15th Precinct." Her voice, imbued with years of command, carried across the parking lot, silencing the murmurs of the crowd. "My badge and ID are in the front left pocket of my jacket, which you would have known if you'd bothered with basic police procedure before assaulting and illegally arresting me." The crowd's collective gasp was audible. People began moving closer, their phones still recording, capturing the sudden shift in the dynamic. Thorne's face flickered through a series of emotions, confusion, disbelief, and a dawning sliver of fear, before hardening back into a sneer. "Yeah, right," he scoffed, but the bravado in his voice had a new, brittle edge. "And I'm the chief of police! Get in the car!" "Check my pocket," Izzy insisted, her gaze unwavering. "Left side." Thorne hesitated. Then, with a sigh of theatrical annoyance, he roughly patted down her jacket pocket. His hand froze. He could feel the familiar, solid shape of a police shield. Slowly, carefully, he withdrew it. The gold-plated captain's shield caught the sun, flashing like a beacon. "This is a fake," he declared, but his voice had lost all its conviction. It was thin and shaky. "That's another felony charge, impersonating an officer." The crowd's reaction was instantaneous and explosive. "She's a captain!" someone yelled. "Oh my God! He arrested a police captain for shopping!" Another voice cried out. The phones pressed closer, documenting every second of Thorne's rapidly crumbling authority. "I strongly suggest you remove these handcuffs, officer," Izzy said quietly, the menace in her tone more potent than any shout. "Before you utterly destroy what's left of your career." "This could be fake," Thorne repeated weakly, but his hands were trembling now. "I'm taking you in for verification, and I'm adding charges for what?" Izzy challenged, her voice dripping with contempt. "For shopping while brown? Is that still the official charge code for this kind of stop, Officer Thorne?" A wave of outrage rippled through the crowd. Someone was live-streaming now. Thorne's face had turned a sickly, mottled red as the full, catastrophic weight of his mistake began to crush him. But instead of backing down, his pride and panic made him double down again. He grabbed Izzy's arm, trying to shove her into the back of the patrol car. "You're just making it worse for yourself," he growled, a desperate man trying to regain control. "Fake badge, resisting, interfering. You're going away for a long time." The crowd's murmur became a roar of protest. "Let her go," someone shouted, and the call was taken up by others, dozens of people chanting in unison, their phones held high like digital torches demanding justice. Thorne was trapped, still gripping Izzy's arm, his eyes darting around, looking for an escape that didn't exist. His usual playbook of intimidation and brute force had backfired in the most spectacular way imaginable. "This is going viral," a teenage girl shouted, her eyes glued to her phone. "It's already got 50,000 shares on TikTok. Justice for Captain Moreno is trending." This is where the story truly begins to unravel, exposing a rot that goes deeper than just one corrupt cop. If you believe no one is above the law, hit that like button right now to show you stand for justice. You won't believe who else is involved in this. Izzy remained perfectly still, a beacon of calm in the swirling vortex of chaos. Her posture was ramrod straight, a silent testament to her unwavering resolve despite the painful bite of the steel cuffs. She had navigated countless high-stakes confrontations in her 2 decades of service, but being on this side of the law, shackled and humiliated, gave her a terrifying new perspective that burned like acid in her gut. A mall security supervisor, a man with a sweat-sheened face and panicked eyes, came sprinting out of the building. Close behind him was a woman in a tailored business suit, clutching a phone to her ear, speaking in rapid, hushed tones. The supervisor took in the scene, the furious crowd, the handcuffed police captain, the increasingly unhinged Officer Thorne, and his face went ashen. "Internal Affairs is en route," the woman in the suit announced, identifying herself as Patricia Vance, the mall's director of public relations. "Officer, perhaps we should move this situation inside to de-escalate." "There is nothing to move inside," Izzy stated firmly, her voice cutting through the noise. "These handcuffs need to come off. Right now." The number of phones in the crowd seemed to multiply. Live streams proliferated, comments and shares exploding across every social media platform. The narrative was spreading faster than a wildfire, far beyond anyone's control. "Look at these numbers," someone shouted. 100,000 live viewers." Patricia Vance stepped closer, her professional smile stretched to its breaking point. "Officer Thorne, given the extenuating circumstances, perhaps it would be prudent to—" "I don't take orders from mall PR," Thorne snapped, but his voice cracked. Beads of sweat dripped from his forehead into his eyes. A second police cruiser arrived, its lights flashing but sirens silent. Sergeant Marcus Williams stepped out, A veteran officer with a weary face that had seen it all. He had worked with Izzy for over a decade and knew her reputation for unshakable integrity. He took in the scene with a single, sweeping glance. "Thorne," Williams called out, his tone deceptively casual. "Care to explain to me why you have one of this department's most decorated captains in cuffs?" Thorne's grip on Izzy's arm finally went slack. "Sergeant, I was responding to a theft in progress. This woman, she claimed to be a captain, but—" "That is Captain Moreno," Williams interrupted, his voice hardening. "Your commanding officer's commanding officer. The shield you're holding is 100% real. I suggest you rectify this situation immediately." The crowd fell silent, hanging on every word. Thorne's face was a canvas of warring emotions, fury, terror, and a desperate, last-ditch calculation. Finally, with hands that shook so badly he could barely fit the key in the lock, he removed the handcuffs. Izzy rubbed her raw wrists, already seeing the deep red welts the metal had left behind. They would be dark bruises by morning. More evidence. Patricia Vance stepped forward, speaking loudly enough for every phone to capture her words. "Captain Moreno, on behalf of the shops at Viridia Valley, I wish to extend our most sincere apologies for this unfortunate misunderstanding. We pride ourselves on creating a safe and welcoming environment for all our guests, and it's clear that today we have failed to meet that standard." "An unfortunate misunderstanding?" Izzy repeated, her voice laced with ice. "Is that your new corporate term for racial profiling and assault?" The PR director flinched as if struck. "We will, of course, be conducting a full and thorough internal investigation," Vance stammered, her professional composure disintegrating. "All of our security protocols will be reviewed and—" "Save it!" Izzy cut her off. "Your security cameras recorded everything. I strongly suggest you preserve every second of that footage." The crowd murmured its approval. Several people shouted their support, offering to email their own videos directly to her. While the mall's PR team scrambled to do damage control, Sergeant Williams moved closer to Izzy, speaking in a low voice only she could hear. "You should know Thorne was on his radio screaming for a supervisor before I even got here." "Let me guess," Izzy replied quietly. "He was already writing his version of the official report." Williams nodded grimly. "He's claiming you were non-compliant and struck him during the arrest. You know how this game is played. The first report filed often becomes the official truth." A fresh wave of fury washed over Izzy, but she kept her expression unreadable. She'd seen this tactic employed countless times to justify excessive force, especially against people of color who had the audacity to question authority. "He has no idea who he's dealing with," she told Williams. The crowd finally began to thin as mall management desperately tried to restore some semblance of normalcy. Izzy retrieved her belongings, including her captain's shield, which Thorne had contemptuously dropped on the asphalt, before walking to her car. The drive home was surreal. The familiar, tree-lined streets of her quiet suburban neighborhood looked the same. But for her, everything had changed. Her hands were steady on the steering wheel, but her mind was a whirlwind, processing the profound implications of what had just happened. She walked into her house and went straight to her home office. She needed to document every detail, every word, every action, while the memory was still raw. Her laptop hummed to life. An email notification pinged. It was from the department. The subject line read, "Incident Report, Drunks IR 77439. Izzy opened the attached file, her jaw tightening with every line she read. According to Officer Thorne's official report, she had been hostile, combative, and aggressive from the moment of contact. He claimed she had physically struck the mall security guards and had violently resisted his legitimate attempts to de-escalate the situation. The report was a masterclass in fiction, painting a picture of an unhinged, out-of-control woman of color. the very stereotype she had spent her entire career fighting to dismantle. She leaned back in her chair, the lies on the screen burning like a brand. The report had been CC'd to Internal Affairs, the Chief's office, and the police union. Thorne had moved with lightning speed, seeking to seize control of the narrative before the truth could even get its boots on. The kitchen clock read 7:30 p.m. when Ava Chen arrived, carrying a bottle of expensive red wine and wearing the grimly determined expression Izzy knew all too well. As one of the city's top defense attorneys, Ava had a finely tuned sense for when a storm was brewing. "I ordered Thai," Izzy said, gesturing towards the takeout containers on the dining table. "Figured we'd need some fuel." Ava set down her briefcase and uncorked the wine. "I read the report you forwarded me. It's even worse than I imagined, Izzy." They sat at the table, the familiar comfort of their ritual, food, wine, and strategy, now shadowed by the day's ugly events. They fell into a practiced rhythm, a testament to years of friendship forged in the trenches of a flawed justice system. "Give it to me straight," Izzy said, pushing a piece of pineapple around her plate with no real appetite. "How bad is this?" Ava took a long, slow sip of wine, collecting her thoughts. "The report is a work of art, in a sinister way. It's perfectly crafted to trigger a full-blown IA investigation and put you on the defensive. Thorne knows exactly what he's doing. He's officially alleging assault on an officer. He's painted you as unstable and uncooperative, and he's got those 2 mall cops to back his story." "But there are videos," Izzy protested. "Dozens, maybe hundreds of videos. The entire world saw what really happened." "Videos help, but you know how the department operates. They'll argue the footage is taken out of context, that it doesn't show what led up to the incident. They'll dissect your every move, your tone of voice. They'll claim you escalated the situation by not complying immediately." Ava's fork clinked against her plate as she set it down. "And let's be brutally honest, we both know how the system treats minority officers who dare to make waves." Izzy pushed her plate away, the food turning to ash in her mouth. "So, what are my options?" "Legally, we fight it tooth and nail. The videos are our strongest asset, and your service record is impeccable, but—" Ava hesitated, choosing her words with a lawyer's precision. "If the department's leadership decides to circle the wagons and push Thorne's narrative, you could be facing a lengthy suspension pending investigation. They might even try to use this to force you into early retirement, to quietly push you out." "Over a false shoplifting accusation?" Izzy's voice rose with disbelief. "No," Ava said softly. "Over challenging the status quo. Over making them look bad on a global stage. Over being a powerful Latina woman who refused to be quietly humiliated." The devastating truth of those words hung in the air between them. Izzy stood and walked to the kitchen window, staring out at the peaceful, manicured lawns of her neighborhood. Nothing felt peaceful anymore. "I could go public," she said, turning back to face her friend. "The story is already a phenomenon. I could do interviews, get my side out there." Ava's expression grew even more somber. "That's a high-risk, high-reward strategy. Remember Captain Miller from the 7th Precinct? He went to the press about racial profiling in his unit a few years back. The department made his life a living hell. Last I heard, he's working private security in another state. The system has a long memory and powerful ways of making examples of those who break the code of silence. So, I'm just supposed to take it?" Izzy's hands clenched at her sides. "Let them smear my name, destroy my career, everything I've dedicated my life to?" "No," Ava said firmly. "We fight smart. We gather our own evidence. We build an unshakable case." She paused, then added, "And Izzy, I don't think this is just about you anymore." "What do you mean?" Ava opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder, spreading several legal documents across the table. In the last 18 months, I have personally defended 8 clients, all people of color, arrested for petty crimes at or near the Viridia Valley Mall. All were charged with resisting arrest or assaulting an officer after they tried to file harassment complaints against the security staff. Izzy leaned over the papers, her training kicking in as she absorbed the details. It's the same group of officers in almost every report: Thorne, Martinez, Cooper, and look at this pattern. The more serious charges are always added after the initial complaint is filed. It's retaliation, a way to intimidate people into silence. A cold dread snaked its way down Izzy's spine. The implications were staggering. How many of these cases are there? These are just the ones who could afford to hire me. How many others couldn't? How many took plea deals because they were terrified? How many just stayed silent? The conversation stretched late into the night as they dissected the files, searching for patterns, piecing together a much larger, more sinister picture. By the time Ava left, it was nearly midnight. Sleep was a distant fantasy. Izzy sat in her dark living room, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her laptop as she scrolled through the endless deluge of social media posts. The videos of her arrest were everywhere. The comments were a toxic battlefield. Some expressed pure outrage, demanding justice. Others spewed vile, racist venom, accusing her of playing the race card. A national news site had already published a feature. Decorated police captain arrested, a case of racial profiling or an officer out of control. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. An unknown number. She opened the text message, and the words made her sit bolt upright. "Back off, Captain. You have no idea what you're messing with." Izzy stared at the screen, her mind automatically cataloging the details. Local area code, sent via a standard carrier, not a burner app. The threat was clear, yet cleverly worded to be just shy of a criminal offense. She took a screenshot, documenting the time and date. One more piece of evidence. The phone's glow lit up her face in the darkness, highlighting the new, hard set of her jaw. They thought a little intimidation would be enough to make her back down. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The early morning sun streamed through the large windows of Ava Chen's high-rise office as Izzy arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. The law firm was still quiet, the pre-work hum not yet begun, which was exactly why they had planned to meet before anyone else arrived. "I was up all night digging through case law and cross-referencing arrest records," Ava said, gesturing to a desk already buried under stacks of legal files. The dark circles under her eyes told a story of sleepless diligence that mirrored Izzy's own. "What I'm finding, it's bigger and dirtier than we ever imagined." Izzy sank into the plush leather chair across from her friend, clutching a large travel mug of coffee like a lifeline. "Show me." Ava spread dozens of case files across her expansive mahogany desk, creating a grim mosaic of injustice. Each of these represents a false arrest report from the last 2 years. Every single one is a minority resident. The vast majority of incidents occurred at or near the Viridia Valley Mall. How many are we talking about? 53 cases that I can confirm through public records. But Izzy, this is just the tip of the iceberg. For every person who had the resources or the courage to fight, how many were railroaded through the system? Izzy leaned forward, her trained investigator's eye scanning the documents, recognizing the patterns immediately. The same arresting officers appear over and over again: Thorne, Martinez, Cooper, and look at the charges. Ava tapped a highlighted section on several files. Resisting arrest, assaulting an officer, disorderly conduct. They're all subjective charges. A citizen's word against a cop's, which in a courtroom is almost always a losing battle for the citizen. Izzy finished, her jaw tightening. Exactly. And this is where the scheme truly reveals itself, Ava said, pulling out a spreadsheet she had compiled overnight. Of these 53 cases, 91% ended in a guilty plea. The defendants almost always accept a plea deal rather than risk a lengthy prison sentence at trial. Those plea rates are astronomically high, Izzy noted, her investigative instincts firing on all cylinders. And every single one of these plea deals includes a mandatory term of probation, Ava said, her voice taking on a sharp, angry edge. Specifically, probation supervised by a private contractor called New Horizon Supervision Services. Izzy's eyebrows shot up. Private probation? I thought the county handled all that. It's a disturbing new trend. Municipalities outsource their probation services to private companies to cut costs. But look at the exorbitant fees these people are being charged. Ava handed her another document, a fee schedule from New Horizon. Monthly supervision fees, mandatory drug testing fees, whether they have a drug history or not, electronic monitoring ankle bracelet fees, GPS tracking fees. Some of these people, arrested for something as minor as trespassing, end up paying tens of thousands of dollars over the course of their probation. It's a modern-day debtor's prison, Izzy muttered, a cold anger building in her chest. And if they miss a single payment, they're in violation of their probation. They get sent back to jail, and the cycle of fees and debt starts all over again. She stood up, too agitated to remain seated. I need to access our internal precinct files on this. There has to be a paper trail. Be careful, Izzy, Ava warned, after that threat you received last night. I am still a captain in this department. I have every right and every duty to review arrest records. Izzy gathered her purse. They can't stop me from doing my job. An hour later, Izzy sat at her desk in the 15th precinct, methodically pulling up digital records. The atmosphere was chilly. She could feel the sideways glances from her fellow officers, could hear the whispered conversations that abruptly stopped the moment she walked by. Thorne's fabricated report had clearly made the rounds. She ignored them all, her focus entirely on her computer screen. Years of arrest data scrolled past as she narrowed her search parameters. Location: the shops at Viridia Valley. Arresting officer: Thorne. Charge: resisting arrest. The number of hits was staggering. Then she found something that made her breath catch in her throat. An internal departmental memo from the chief's office detailing the city's new partnership with New Horizon Supervision Services. The CEO of the company was listed as Sterling Vance, the same family that owned the entire portfolio of Vance Holdings, including the Viridia Valley Mall. Digging deeper, she unearthed corporate registration documents. New Horizon Supervision Services was a subsidiary of Vance Holdings. The security firm that employed Peterson and Clark was another subsidiary. It was a completely closed loop. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ava. Found something else. The number of these specific arrests spikes dramatically in the last week of every fiscal quarter, right before Vance Holdings reports its earnings to shareholders. Izzy's mind reeled. The pieces were slotting together into a monstrous picture. More arrests meant more people funneled into the probation system. More people on probation meant more fees collected by New Horizon. The mall's private security team, owned by Vance, targeted minority shoppers. The local police, specifically Thorne's unit, made the arrests based on false pretenses. And the Vance family, through their ownership of the probation company, profited directly from every single conviction. She quickly printed out the key documents, tucking them securely into her briefcase. On her way out of the precinct, she felt more eyes on her back, heard more whispers. Let them talk. She was hunting much bigger game now. The afternoon sun was harsh as Izzy parked her car across the street from the Viridia Valley Mall. The building's gleaming glass and steel facade projected an image of clean, upscale prosperity. Just yesterday, she had seen it as the scene of her personal humiliation. Today, she saw it for what it truly was: the hub of a massive criminal conspiracy. She watched the shoppers come and go. She saw the Vance security guards stationed at every entrance, their hands resting on their radios. She saw a young black mother hurry past, clutching her purse tightly, her eyes darting nervously. She saw a Hispanic teenage boy being unsubtly tailed by a guard, just as she had been. The sheer, calculated evil of the scheme hit her all at once. How long had this been going on? How many lives had been systematically derailed by these false charges? How many families had been bled dry by these predatory probation fees, all to pad the Vance family's bottom line? Izzy gripped her steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. In her 20 years in law enforcement, she'd seen her share of corruption, of systemic racism, of greed. But this was different. This was a cold, calculated corporate machine designed for the sole purpose of organized exploitation. She stared at the mall's towering entrance, the very spot where she'd been dragged out in handcuffs less than 24 hours ago. Her voice was barely a whisper in the confines of her car. This was never just about me. Izzy had just settled at her desk, the stack of incriminating documents spread before her, when a sharp knock on her open office door made her look up. A young Asian-American woman stood in the doorway, a reporter's notebook in her hand, her expression one of intense focus. "Captain Moreno? I'm Chloe Kim from the City Herald." She stepped into the office with a confidence that belied her years, her press badge swinging from a lanyard around her neck. "Do you have a minute?" Izzy's first instinct was to give her standard, department-approved no comment. But there was something in Chloe's eyes, a fierce, unyielding determination, that made her pause. "Close the door." Chloe sat, already pulling out her phone and setting it to record. "I've been following your case since the video broke, but that's not really why I'm here. For the past 6 months, I've been investigating Officer Thorne and his unit's connection to private probation schemes." Izzy leaned back in her chair, studying the young journalist. This could be a trap, or it could be the alliance she desperately needed. "What have you found?" "Money trails leading to shell corporations, suspicious patterns in arrest timing, a wall of silence from every official source." Chloe swiped through documents on a tablet. "I kept hitting dead ends. Sources would suddenly go quiet. Public records requests would get lost in bureaucracy. Then I saw the video of what they did to you, and I knew. This was the crack in the wall I'd been looking for." "Your chance for what?" "To blow this whole rotten system wide open," Chloe said, her eyes blazing with conviction. "I have bank records showing massive wire transfers from New Horizon to offshore accounts linked to Vance Holdings. I have tax documents that make no sense, but I need someone on the inside. Someone who can help me connect the official police work to the dirty money." Izzy considered her options. A journalist could be a powerful ally or a dangerous liability. But Chloe's passion, her righteous anger, reminded Izzy of herself 20 years ago, a rookie cop determined to change the world. "What's your angle on this?" "The truth," Chloe said simply. "How a racist cop, a corrupt judge, and a greedy corporation are systematically destroying minority lives for profit." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "I grew up in this city. I watched my immigrant parents get harassed by cops, targeted by predatory lenders. This isn't just another story for me. This is personal." After a long, silent moment, Izzy gave a single, decisive nod. "I can't be your official source. It would compromise my position and the case, but I might be able to point you toward people who can help you follow the money." "That's all I need," Chloe smiled, a flash of triumph in her eyes. "And I might have something for you too. Ever heard of the Oak Ridge Justice Coalition?" 2 hours later, Izzy and Chloe sat in the cramped, cluttered back room of a community center. Reverend Marcus Green, a tall, imposing man with graying temples and a powerful presence, spread a series of photographs across a folding table. These are just from the last 3 months, all false arrests, all perpetrated by Thorne and his crew. Around the table sat other community leaders, a high school teacher, a small business owner, a local activist. Each had their own stories of Thorne's reign of terror. Each had been quietly, diligently gathering evidence. "We've been documenting everything," said Lisa Chen, the teacher. "We have sworn witness statements, cell phone videos, even medical records from the people Thorne and his partners have roughed up during arrests. But every formal complaint we file just disappears into a black hole. The Police Civilian Review Board is a joke," added Jerome Wilson, who owned a barber shop just a few blocks from the mall. "They're all in Sterling Vance's pocket." Chloe took rapid-fire notes while Izzy examined the mountain of evidence. Dozens of sworn affidavits described the exact same pattern: a baseless accusation, a violent and escalatory arrest, and intense pressure from the DA's office to accept a plea deal. "This woman here," Reverend Green said, pointing to a photo of a tired-looking woman with 2 young children. "Single mother of 3. Thorne pulled her over for a supposed broken taillight, then claimed she assaulted him when she questioned the stop. Now she's paying New Horizon $300 a month in probation fees she can't afford. She had to take a second job. They threatened to involve Child Protective Services if she tried to fight the charges." Izzy's hands clenched into fists under the table. "Why haven't these stories been made public before?" "Fear," Jerome said, his voice heavy. "Thorne makes brutal examples of people who speak up. You fight a charge, and suddenly you're getting pulled over 3 times a week. Your business gets hit with surprise code violation inspections. Your kids start getting hassled by cops on their way home from school." "But we never stopped keeping records," Reverend Green said, his gaze landing on Izzy. "We were just waiting for someone with the power to actually do something about it." Chloe spoke up. "With these affidavits and my financial documents, we could build an ironclad case for a major exposé. The Herald would run it on the front page." "It will take more than one newspaper article," Izzy cautioned. "The Vance family has an army of lawyers and PR people." "Then we'll write a series," Chloe said, her jaw set. "We'll follow every corrupt thread until the whole rotten tapestry unravels." They spent another hour strategizing, connecting the disparate pieces of the puzzle. The activists had the human stories, years of documented abuse. Chloe had the financial expertise and the paper trail. Izzy had the insider's knowledge of police procedure and the system's weaknesses. "We need to move carefully," Izzy warned as they wrapped up the meeting. "These people are dangerous. They won't go down without a fight." "That's why we need to strike hard and fast," Chloe countered. "Once the first story breaks and people see they're not alone, more victims will come forward. It'll be an avalanche they can't control." Darkness had fallen by the time Izzy pulled into her driveway. The day's revelations weighed on her like a physical burden. So many lives ruined, so much evidence systematically ignored. She had always known racism and corruption existed within the department, but this level of organized, for-profit exploitation shook her to her core. Her porch light flickered as she walked up the path to her front door. The mailbox was overflowing, with letters scattered on the ground beneath it. That was strange. The mail had already been delivered that morning. She gathered the scattered envelopes, her stomach tightening with a sudden, inexplicable dread. There were no return addresses, no postmarks. They had been hand-delivered. Inside, she spread them across her kitchen table. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the first one. It was a crude, racist caricature of a Hispanic woman. Below it, words cut from magazines spelled out a simple message: "Mind your own business." The next envelope contained a series of photographs, grainy, long-lens surveillance shots of her, leaving her house that morning, shopping for groceries last week, meeting Ava at her office. Someone had been watching her, documenting her life. More letters spilled out, filled with racial slurs scrawled in angry, jagged handwriting. Explicit threats against her family. A picture of Sophia's high school. The final envelope contained a single, glossy photo print. It was a still from the news coverage of her being arrested at the mall. Someone had drawn a set of crosshairs directly over her face. She sank heavily into a kitchen chair, the vile, hateful messages surrounding her like toxic confetti. They were trying to frighten her into silence, just as they had frightened so many others. But they had made a grave miscalculation. Captain Isabella Moreno did not scare easily, and now she had concrete proof that they were worried. Worried enough to threaten a police captain. She carefully gathered the letters, placing them in evidence bags, preserving any potential fingerprints or DNA. Tomorrow, she would show them to Chloe and the coalition. Let them document one more piece of the puzzle, one more act of desperate intimidation. The threats didn't deter her. They were fuel. They meant she was getting close to the heart of the conspiracy. And she wasn't alone in this fight anymore. The next morning, Izzy walked through the precinct hallways, the hate mail from the night before a cold, heavy weight in her briefcase. She needed an ally high up on the inside, someone she could trust implicitly. Lieutenant David Reed's office door was open. She could see him at his desk, reviewing reports. "Got a minute, Dave?" she asked, knocking lightly on the doorframe. Reed looked up, his familiar, easygoing smile spreading across his face. "For you, Izzy? Always." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Shut the door." Izzy settled into the chair, studying her old friend's face. She had known Dave Reed for 15 years. They had come up through the ranks together, worked countless tough cases side by side. He had been a vocal supporter of her promotion to captain, and had defended her leadership against the department's old guard more than once. "I need to show you something," she said, her voice low as she pulled out the evidence bags containing the threatening letters. "This was delivered to my house last night." Reed's smile vanished as he examined the vile messages. His jaw tightened when he saw the surveillance photos, and his face was a mask of fury when he saw the picture with the crosshairs. "Jesus Christ, Izzy, have you reported this?" "To who, Dave?" She leaned forward, her eyes locking with his. "This goes deeper than just Thorne and the mall incident. I've been digging, and there's a massive, organized scheme. False arrests, coerced plea deals, all feeding into this private probation racket run by the Vance family." "That's a hell of an accusation," Reed said, setting the letters down carefully. "You have proof?" "I'm building it. I have victim statements, financial records showing suspicious payments from Vance Holdings, and now these." She tapped the evidence bags. Someone is scared enough to try and intimidate a police captain. Reed stood up and began to pace behind his desk, running a hand through his hair. "Look, Izzy, you know I've always had your back. But an investigation of this magnitude could shake the entire department to its foundations." "Maybe it needs to be shaken." Izzy's voice was hard as flint. "You've seen how Thorne operates. You know how many complaints against him we've had to bury. This isn't just about a few dirty cops, Dave. This is systemic." "I hear you," Reed said, stopping his pacing. He turned to face her, his expression serious. "You're right. This needs to be investigated properly, but we have to be smart about it, strategic." He leaned against his desk. "Let me help. I can quietly put out some feelers on my end, see who else in the department might be willing to step forward and talk." A wave of relief washed over Izzy. "Thanks, Dave. I knew I could count on you." "Always," he smiled warmly. "Just watch your back, okay? Maybe you should stay with family for a few days until we figure out who's behind these threats." "I'm not running and hiding," Izzy said firmly. "That's exactly what they want." "Mo, stubborn as ever." Reed shook his head with a fond smile. "All right, at least let me assign a quiet, unmarked patrol car to do regular drive-bys of your house. For peace of mind. I can handle myself, Izzy said as she gathered the letters. But thank you. It helps, knowing you're in my corner. We look out for our own, Reed assured her. Keep me in the loop. Let me know what else you find. The rest of Izzy's day was a blur of routine paperwork and clandestine evidence gathering. She made encrypted digital copies of every document, storing them on multiple secure drives. In cases like this, records had a nasty habit of mysteriously disappearing. It was after midnight when she finally drove home. Her street was quiet, the only sound the chirping of crickets in the cool night air. She pulled into her driveway, and the automatic floodlights illuminated her car. Her blood ran cold. Angry red letters had been spray-painted across the hood and driver's side door. Traitor! Izzy froze, her keys halfway to the door lock. The paint was still wet, dripping slowly down the pristine white finish of her car. Her mind raced. The timing, the specific word choice. This wasn't some random act of vandalism. She did a rapid scan of her surroundings, her hand instinctively moving to the off-duty weapon holstered at her hip. The shadows were still. Whoever had done this was long gone. With trembling fingers, she took out her phone and began taking pictures of the damage. Then she saw something else, something that made her stomach clench with a sickening dread. Scratched deep into the paint of the driver's side door, they had keyed a message. Keep your mouth shut, Captain. Only someone inside the department would call her by her rank. Only someone on the inside would know she was building a case. She thought of the handful of people she had confided in. Ava, Chloe, the activists, and Dave Reed. Her conversation with Reed replayed in her mind. Let me help. I can quietly put out some feelers. Keep me in the loop. Damn it, she whispered into the night. She had walked right into his office and handed him everything. The scope of her investigation, the nature of the evidence she was collecting, the fact that she was working with outsiders. If he was working with Thorne and the Vance family, she had just given them a roadmap to her entire strategy. Inside her house, Izzy sank heavily into a kitchen chair. Her captain's shield sat on the table where she'd left it that morning. The gold-plated metal seemed to mock her in the dim light. 20 years. She had worn that shield with pride for 20 years. She had believed in what it was supposed to stand for. She had defended the department against accusations of systemic rot, convincing herself that she could create change from within. Now she stared at the symbol of her life's work and wondered if the corruption went all the way to the top, if there was anything left worth saving. Her vision blurred as tears of pure rage and profound betrayal threatened to spill over. She blinked them back, hard. This was no time for self-pity. She had decisions to make. Trust no one in the department. Document everything. Build the case in the shadows until she had proof so undeniable that not even a traitorous lieutenant could bury it. The Vandals had made one thing terrifyingly clear. Inside the walls of the 15th Precinct, she was completely on her own. Her shield gleamed accusingly in the dim kitchen light, the weight of 20 years of service pressing down on her shoulders as she confronted the horrifying possibility that the institution she loved had become the very monster she had sworn to destroy.